You know, public pensions, we hear about them all the time, right? And usually it's alongside some absolutely eye-watering numbers. Billions, sometimes trillions of dollars. It can feel pretty abstract. But today, we're going to pull back the curtain and see exactly how those massive figures get cooked up. Okay, let's get into it. So, you've definitely seen the headlines. State pension faces billion-dollar shortfall, and it makes you wonder, right? Is that a literal pile of cash they're missing somewhere? I mean, how could they possibly know a number that specific? Well, that's the core question we are going to unpack right now. So, for real, where does that billion-dollar number come from? Well, the answer isn't just simple accounting. It's actually a process that's part financial analysis and, believe it or not, part artful prediction. And that process is called an actuarial valuation. Honestly, the best way to think about it is like a financial health checkup for a pension plan. It's this snapshot in time that's designed to answer one single crucial question. Based on everything we know and everything we can guess, is there going to be enough money to pay for all the retirement promises that have been made? So let's zoom in a little and see what actually goes into creating this so-called financial snapshot. Because it's way less about adding up what happened in the past and much, much more about making a really educated guess about the future. And this right here is the key to the whole thing. You got to understand that every single part of this process, every calculation, is built on a foundation of predictions. It's really just a super sophisticated attempt to peer decades into the future. Of course, to predict the future, you need some kind of crystal ball. And in the world of pensions, that crystal ball is a set of carefully chosen predictions called actuarial assumptions. These assumptions are basically the engine that drives this entire valuation. Now, what's really cool is how these assumptions get broken down into two basic buckets. On one hand, you've got predictions about people. You know, how long will they work? When are they going to retire? And maybe most importantly, how long are they going to live in retirement? Then on the other hand, you have predictions about money. How much will all the investments earn? How fast will people's salaries go up? And if we dive a little deeper into that economic side, these are the real heavy hitters. The assumptions about investment returns, salary growth, inflation, these things have a massive, massive impact on the final numbers. Get these wrong even by a little bit, and the whole picture can change dramatically. Okay, so once the actuaries have settled on all of these assumptions, what do they do with them? Well, they use them to calculate the two sides of a pension plan's balance sheet. And this just lays it out perfectly. At the end of the day, it's a simple comparison of what a pension plan owes versus what it owns. The owes side, that's called the liabilities, is the value today of every single retirement promise. The owns side is just the current market value of all the cash and investments in the front. Pretty simple, right? And every single year, as people go to work, that owes side of the ledger gets a little bit bigger. The estimated cost of all the promises that were earned just in this current year, that's called the normal cost. You can think of it as the pension bill for this year's work. Okay, so here's the bottom line. When what a pension owes is bigger than what it owns, you have a shortfall. And the official fancy term for this is the unfunded actuarial accrued liability, or just UAL. This is that big, scary number you see in the headlines. It's simply the total liabilities minus the total assets. That's it. Now, of all those assumptions we talked about, there is one that has way more influence than any other. Just like the quote says, that investment return assumption is by far the single biggest driver of that final debt number. Let me show you what I mean. So let's look at a hypothetical pension plan. Let's say this plan assumes its investments are going to earn a pretty optimistic 8% every single year. Based on that, its calculated unfunded liability, its debt, is $2 billion. But watch this. What happens if they get just a little more cautious and lower that assumption by just half a percentage point, down to 7.5%? Boom. The unfunded liability instantly jumps by $300 million to $2.3 billion. A tiny, tiny change in a prediction creates this massive change in the debt. That's just how powerful these assumptions are. Seeing how these numbers can swing around so wildly, it kind of begs the question, right? What's the actual goal here? I mean, while the ideal is to be fully funded, that term itself can be a little bit misleading. So a much simpler way to track a plan's health is with something called the funded ratio. You just take the assets, what the plan owns, and divide it by the liabilities, what it owes. And the result is a percentage. So if a plan has $80 in assets for every $100 in promises, it's 80% funded. But here's the catch. Getting to 100% and actually staying there, it's not so simple. As this slide points out, it's a constantly moving target. New costs are always getting added, the stock market can have a bad year, the numbers are always in flux. And this also busts a common myth you hear a lot. That old idea that being 80% funded is good enough or healthy is just not considered a safe way to think about it anymore.
So how do plans actually get healthier? Well, the strategies are pretty straightforward, even if they're sometimes hard to do politically. They can use more realistic, more conservative assumptions, they can decide to pay down the debt on a faster schedule, and of course, they can increase the amount of money they put into the plan each year.
So when it's all said and done, that billion-dollar number isn't a bill that's due tomorrow. It's a long-term forecast. It's this complex attempt to balance the very real promises made for our future against the probabilities of today. And that really leaves us with a critical question to think about. What's the right balance of risk, cost, and security for our community?